John Donaldson Technical Institute has for years symbolized modern education in Trinidad and Tobago. But what do we know about the man in whose memory the school was dedicated? John Shelford Donaldson, a founding member of the People's National Movement and Minister of Education in the first PNM government, was a father of five, including John Donaldson Jr., also a former member of Parliament. One of the many Catholic teachers, John Donaldson wanted to change the status quo in the prevailing education system, and along with other like-minded individuals, formed their own group called the Teachers Economic and Cultural Association, or TECA.
He thought that people should be, beside being interested in the job, they need to look after their money. With the result that Dr. Williams, when he came back from his studies abroad, was invited by TECA, that's the association, to come in and give some talks, and he did this almost every Saturday morning in a different part of Trinidad. So one Saturday we'll go to Arima, and another Saturday we'll be down again in Port of Spain, and this went on for a couple of years. With the result that when Dr. Williams was thinking of forming an association, the obvious group, which was already a made group, was TECA. So that the People's National Movement and the Trinidad and Tobago, Economic Cultural Association, were one of the same thing at the beginning. And that is how Dad became involved in the PNM.
TECA was one of many movements that appeared on the scene in the late 40s, early 50s. It was essentially a group of black teachers who were very, very unhappy with the relationship between them as teachers and the Catholic hierarchy. They felt that being a black teacher was not, that black teachers were not given the kind of recognition that teachers deserve. And that more attention was paid to the people who looked like the Catholic management. So in a sense, TECA was started as a pressure group for teachers, mainly black teachers, of which Donaldson was one of the leading people. DeWilton Rogers, F.G. Maynard, who was not a Catholic, but who also shared some of the concerns of TECA. But it was more than a pressure group for teachers. It was essentially a cultural organization, a group which wanted to get teachers involved in literary activity, cultural activity, educational activity, to talk about slavery, talk about colonialism, talk about West Indian Federation, etc. These were the topics of the day. And when Williams came back, Donaldson felt that Williams was the right man to energize that movement. So he invited Williams to be the consultant to TECA. Williams wrote back indicating his, in a sense, delight with the invitation, because he felt that up to that point he was at the Caribbean Commission as a researcher, but he wanted a mechanism to connect him to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. So he accepted. He wrote back saying that he welcomes the invitation. Insofar as he had time, he would, devote much of it to the organization and its agenda. So that formal relationship developed between Williams and what he calls his teacher friends. And the two, Donaldson was one of the most dynamic members of TECA. He was the person who, in a sense, engineered that link, that connect between teachers and the embryonic national movement, which Williams was anxious to be a part of. And I think it's fair to say that Donaldson, I think, supported ably by Rogers, the Alexander brothers, there were a number of them, Richardson, they constituted the bedrock upon which the PNM was founded. Donaldson used to say that most of the parties in Trinidad were founded or were based on the trade union movement. But in the case of Trinidad and Tobago, the Nationalist Party was based on, the rock was the teachers' movement.
With the formation of the People's National Movement in January 1956 and its success in the federal elections, John S. Donaldson became a member of the Legislative Council representing Port of Spain Northeast.
In those days, to be a daughter of a representative was something where you almost had to give your life to, because your father did it, your brother did it, so you had no alternative. Every day, I remember, Dad used to leave Observatory Street where we lived. He would walk about 2 blocks up to Quarry Street, this place that's opposite to the Quarry Street Anglican School. And there, people came in from the constituency to see you. If they were having a baby, they needed to have some help with a baby. If they needed to get into a school, and just counseling and talking, and of course getting you to join the PNM. That was the job of the constituency representative. And this is something you had to do every day of life, and every month you gave some kind of report to the constituency members. And every year you gave a larger report to members of the PNM, whether it's the General Council or the Women's League or what have you. But you had to do that. I do not think you have to do it now, I'm not quite sure. But I know then that was something that was compulsory. You lived in the constituency and you worked for the constituency. I remember it happened the very night that Dad won the election. It must have been about 11 o'clock, results had come in. And of course, I started to close up the house. Lo and behold, the people who had come down to get the results and to see him, they said to me, "Ma'am, it's not only your father now, he's our father too, so open up the house." And that is how it was forevermore until he died.
With the lack of secondary school places available in the denominational and private school system, the government embarked on a plan to increase the number of schools, setting the stage for the concordat between the Catholic Church and the state, which subsequently included all religions. Just about that time, free secondary education was introduced.
The story about it, as told by Dr. Allen, who recounted the story, was that they were discussing, Williams, Patricia Robinson, and a couple of other people were discussing the budget. And these technocrats literally tore up the budget that Williams had prepared. And Williams was very concerned. He said, "And what do we tell the people?" And then somebody said something about free secondary education. Tell them about and then Williams said, "Free secondary education." At which time, John Donaldson Sr., who was the parliamentary secretary in the Ministry of Education, walked in. And Williams said, John, we have just decided to introduce free secondary education." It hadn't been discussed.
Sometimes even the best of friends have their rough times.
The relationship between Williams and Donaldson, I suspect, was not always of the best, particularly in the latter days. By latter, I mean the late 60s. Not the late 60s, the late 50s. Because interestingly enough, if Rogers is to be believed, Wilton Rogers, in his book on the PNM, Williams did not want to endorse Donaldson's candidacy in the 1961 elections. In fact, as I recall, there was the constituency group wanted Donaldson, but Williams didn't. And the explanation that I've been given for this seeming conflict between the two men was that it was really not a conflict. Williams wanted to bring other kinds of people into the party, people who look differently. John D was black, and you had a number of people who looked like that. Williams wanted to change the chemistry, the ethnic chemistry of the party, and gave his support to people like Max Taiwan, etc. And there are people in the party who understood the contribution that Donaldson made, were not entirely happy about that. That's one of the things I remember about the relationship between the two people. And Rogers complained that Williams had this tendency to ignore the people who had built the party, to sideline them, and that a number of new people were coming into the party who did not pay their dues.
On May 14th, 1961, one of the best-loved politicians, John S. Donaldson Sr., died in a car crash at Dunarine Junction in McBean, Couva. He was only 57.
Basically, what I would say is that in the construction of the history of the PNM, John Donaldson would be a very pivotal figure.